Hey guys, welcome back to the other side where we talk about trials, triumph, and everything in between because that's where we believe the magic lies in the in between. Today I have a special guest in light of recent events and everything that's been going on. I thought it would be wonderful to have my friend Andrea Vargas back. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has been doing a lot of work right now with families and people just trying to cope with what's going on. And honestly, I needed her here for me because, as I mentioned to her, I voted for safer borders, but I did not imagine that people would be getting snatched off the streets. And so, I'm sitting with a lot of different emotions, and I know I'm not the only one. So I thought it would be really good for her to give us some insight on the people that are being affected, literally, and then, just kind of some help on how we can all navigate these different emotions that we're all feeling right now. So welcome, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here so quickly. Like you jumped at it, and I appreciate you so much for it because as you know, it's a lot. And so I guess we could start with what you've been dealing with, like what people have been coming to you with right now, just so we can start with some empathy, right? And some understanding on what others are feeling at this time.
Well, thank you for having me. I know that this is definitely a very heavy topic, especially within the Latino community, and not just the Latino community, but the immigrant community, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not just Latinos being impacted by what's happening; it's also all immigrant communities, and we don't hear as much about the other immigrant communities, but it's definitely so many of us being impacted by it, and it is very heavy. And I've had the opportunity to be invited to like hold space in various settings, and the heaviness and the emotions and the fear is definitely in many of our communities and all of our communities. And so how do we hold space and support each other through this, and how do we have these open conversations?
Yeah, that's why I think these open conversations are so important. Now, you said other communities, not just the Hispanic community.
Hmm.
That was my thing. I'm like, okay, now we're being racial profiled. It's obvious,
Yes.
right? I don't see busloads of Asians. I'm not seeing busloads of Muslims. Not that they haven't had their share of trauma in their history, but it's obvious that they are targeting Hispanics. And so when you talk about other, what are you seeing with the other
Well, I know
nationalities
that
and
we
cultures?
we have a lot of the Asian communities also being impacted by these raids or these kidnappings, because that's what they are, right? I think that they're definitely mostly targeting the Latino community, which is something that we've seen historically, and we've had this conversation in the past, right?
Mhm.
I think this is one of our very first conversations here, and this happened in the 30s and then in the 50s, and a lot of the historical events that we see, even when you look it up, a lot of it is in black and white or sepia because it happened such a long time ago. But
Mhm.
it seems like so far, because it is in black and white, so we disconnect so much from it. But in reality, you know, there are people that were born in the 50s that are in their 60s, 70s now. So a lot of people have experienced this in our
Mhm.
communities.
Yes.
And I think that we are an easy target because of the rhetoric that has been continuous within our community, about our community, right? Um, Through politics, through racism, through various avenues, as to what our community is.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, our communities are just hardworking people that come here for a better life, or to support their families, whether it's to support their families here and start a new life here, or whether it's to support their families back in our countries. And again, why do we come here, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, why do
nobody leaves their country just for fun.
no, they don't, but they're also coming into another country, right? We did have this conversation. I remember clearly, which is so crazy that it is full circle because I remember you stating, they could be snatching us off the streets. Like, don't
Hmm.
be crazy, and here we are. So, but, they do come to our country, right, for a better life. They want a better way of living. They want to make more money. They want more possibilities, but they don't become a citizen. So, and a lot of them have been here a lot of many, many years. So, in your experience, why is that? Because, like you said, we knew this was coming, right? It wasn't new. And I do know it's difficult. I do know it's a process because I know a lot of people who've actually gone through the process, right? Not just Latinos, Filipinos and, other cultures. But in your experience, why have they not become citizens? They want all the benefits, right? And they want to live in the country that's free. But then a lot of even, I'm not even talking just Latinos, I'm talking other cultures too. They want to not bring, but they do, which is fine. We all have our rituals and the things that we hold dear in our heart, in our spirit that we can't deny. But we can't go to another country and change their country. Yet I see a lot of people wanting to come to our country and change our country. That was part of the reason for my vote, right? So when people come, the people you've dealt with that have not become citizens, what's their reasoning behind it?
Well, there's a lot there, right? I first like what benefits do they want, right? Because at the end of the day,
I mean, it's
it's
basic need, right? They want to
correct.
be safe. They want food for their family. They want a job. They
But
don't,
that's a right.
a
That's
lot
not a
of
benefit.
people, but not everybody.
Correct. It's a right for everybody to have food and
Of
shelter,
course.
right?
Yeah.
It's part of our basic human need.
But nobody just
Um,
gives it to me.
Correct, but nobody's just handing it to them either. They come here and they work, right? And yes, and like everything, and in every culture, there are good people and there are bad people, and it's not even bad people. It's just people that have experienced so much trauma that we've talked about behind every behavior there's an emotion, and so when there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of fear, a lot of time we continue to inflict and project that fear that we're feeling onto other people. And that is exactly what we are feeling in our communities right now, is the fear that they have, because at the end of the day, nothing has been handed to Latinos. Like, we have been able to, and me included, right? Like, I have been able to create the life that I've created and be where I'm at, not because it's been handed to me, but because I've worked really hard for it, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, even within what our needs are and why we come here, it's there's so many layers to it, and and it's not that people want to come here and change what like, what is this country to begin with, right? It was founded on what? What was it founded on?
Yeah. Well,
So, what are we trying to change? The fact that we bring our culture here? Like, if immigrants didn't live in LA, what would LA look like? And not only that, you say that we can't go to another country and change it. We're seeing that
you're
happen in
I
Mexico.
know. And I just thought about it. It's actually happening in
Yes.
Paris and London. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. But that was another reason why I voted the way I voted, right? Because I have seen what they've done in those countries. So again, I'm not just talking Latinos, which is, it's hard, right? Because it's happening mostly to them right now. So I know I'm jumping a little bit, but we still have to keep our borders safe. You want safety. You want shelter. You want your child to grow up in a place that they can feel like who's here, right? It's not just somebody who can hurt them. Not that people that are here can't hurt them, but that's just it. There's enough crazy people here already. And not that everybody that comes over the border is crazy. But if we don't know who's coming over the border, then how are we ever going to stay safe? And then it takes me also back to what we spoke about before, right? Like you said, who is running the country? And the trauma throughout the generations. Now, I know I threw a lot at you, but do you feel like we can maybe educate, or do you feel like I believe it's intentional, right? I believe it's intentional to keep us down.
Yes, it's a much bigger systemic issue. And it's with all people of color, right? It's not just with Latinos. There's a systemic issue that doesn't allow us to succeed to some degree, right? And when they see that enough of us have succeeded, we go through this cycle again of targeting the people that they've tried to keep down that are becoming successful. So again, nothing is handed to us.
But are
It's
you
not like
saying
there's Latinos or minorities that are like nepo kids that are just being handed these things. Like, a lot of our communities work really hard, right? Like, I'm first generation here. And so at the end of the day, like, I saw everything that my parents went through, and and being And you asked about citizenship.
Yes.
It's not it's not an easy process. It's a lengthy process. It's an expensive process. And again, because there are so many different immigrants that come to this country, or people, like, we're not even immigrants, like the land belongs to everybody. We created the borders, right?
Right.
M-
I mean,
We
but we
think that
can't.
the land belongs to
I
us,
mean,
but
but
it
that's
doesn't.
like saying we
We
take over the
belong to the
world.
land, right?
Yes, I
And
totally.
so at the end of the day, the system is designed to make it very difficult, and also immigration offices get to choose who's going to become a resident and who isn't, right? I think that we were very fortunate that in the 80s, it was through Reagan and amnesty, my parents were able to become residents. A lot of people were able to become
Yes.
residents, which is why a lot of Latinos were Republican for a long time, because the Republican Party was very different, and they were about immigration, and they were about reformation, and allowing people the path to residency and citizenship in a rightful way. And that has changed significantly. The Republican Party no longer is that, right? And not only that, but they say, like, why don't they do it the right way? If they're being arrested at immigration court, how are they
I
not
mean,
doing
but
it the
that's
right way?
now. That's
Correct, but
today.
it's
That
always
hasn't always been
yes,
now.
but it has always been an issue, right? We are sending 4 and 5-year-olds to court without an attorney and without their parents now. Like, what's going to happen to these children?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, something needs to change in the system so that so that there is an easier pathway, right? I know for a while they were sending, when they were applying for residency, they were sending, because I have family that went through it, right? And they would send them back to their country for 10 years. And then after 10 years, they would get approved for residency, and then they could return. So there's been other ways of doing things, but we know that this administration is not one that is willing to work with immigrant communities for an easier path, or a path where we are constantly being denied.
Okay, so this administration just took over. I mean, it's not like he's been president forever, right? The Democrats have been in office
Yeah,
forever if
and
we
it's
want to
every
bring
administration
politics
at the end
into
of the
it.
day.
But I mean, what about the flood and the open borders? I mean, how did that help anything?
What open borders? There's never been open borders.
When we had Biden in office, they were flooding in. There was open borders. How can you say that? Maybe not open borders to become a citizen, but anybody can walk through the border and come to America. I mean, you can't. I mean, I just saw TikTok. This chick got deported from Mexico back to California. Like, we're not the only country.
Well, I think that information is inaccurate. I know that we did have a huge wave of people come from different parts of, like, Central America back in, I think it was 2016, uh
I mean, it
during
was
the
all
previous
over the
one.
news.
But it's not that they're open borders that people are just walking in. It's
They were
that
literally just walking in.
people walk to the border for asylum or as refugees, and there's a due process there as well, right? And they weren't given that due process, and they were being held in camps at the border. They weren't walking through. They were being detained at the border. And this happened a few years ago. It wasn't very long ago that this happened. And so this time it there, and people aren't coming now. But again, why do people come? There was an entire caravan of people traveling through Central America, through Mexico, to come to the border because they thought that they were going to be given asylum. So again, why do people come here? We had a wave of Venezuelan people come here,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Argentina. So it's not just Mexican
No,
people,
no,
but
no, no.
again,
Well, I think that's why they're
do
going after
but
brown people.
why are people fleeing their countries? Like, we have to look at the much bigger picture at the end of the day, because a lot of these people don't leave their countries because they want to. It's why do they leave them? And a lot of the time is because of colonization and wanting of the resources.
But that's not all the
and
time.
it's not.
We can't act like everybody who's leaving their country is fleeing because they're living such horrible. I mean, it's not everybody. It's not. There's a lot of people who are just coming because they want to come to America. Estados Unidos, right? It's Estados Unidos. They love it. They in the Dominican, they marry Americans to come to the country. So we can't say it's just because they're fleeing from trauma.
The majority of the time, that is the reason.
So now we also spoke about trauma being passed down, right?
Intergenerational trauma. Yep.
Intergenerational trauma.
Epigenetics.
Yes. Now, I see the bigger picture, right? I just do. I This is not by accident. The wave of the fear and the friction and the trauma and the targeting to the Hispanics is intentional. Absolutely, I believe it. So now how can people we can't change the world. We can try, right? We can try by having conversations, enlightening people, on different things that may help them get through something like this. So now let's kind of switch it, right? So they've already had trauma and now they're being targeted and they're feeling trauma again. What can they do? What are you teaching when you're going to these events and holding spaces? How are you helping them get through this trauma?
Well, I'm not helping them get through the trauma, right? I'm holding space for the fear that is currently happening in our communities. I'm holding space for whatever is coming up for them, but I'm not helping them through the trauma, right? Because
Well,
that
little
takes more than
dust.
just like,
Yeah,
a círculo of
of
people
course.
gathering. I think at the end of the day is what do we have control of in this moment, right? And it's very little at the end of the day. So how do we hold space for each other? How do we build community? Because something that a reoccurring conversation that I have in my groups and in my workshops is, we need community at the end of the day. Many of us do come from small villages or small towns where we are community, where you know everybody,
Yes.
where you go out for groceries and you constantly are in contact with people and are
Yes.
in community. And then we come here and it's a very individualistic society.
Mhm.
And so we lose that community. And so it is important for us to continue to build community now more than ever. And we see it, right? And that's something that is very beautiful about our culture that sometimes, we don't get along the best, but when it comes down to it, we're always there for each other and
Yes.
people are showing up. And that's what's important. And it's important to build community at this moment. It's important for us to be together in resisting, and in continuing to do this work because it is for the long haul. And I'm pretty sure that it's not going to be the last time that we are in this situation because history tends to repeat itself. And here we are again, right? But
Yes.
everything is being documented. We have social media now, we have cameras, we have everything is being documented. And so we're going to have a lot more documentation. And, as Latinos, it's also part of responsibility to continue to educate ourselves about our history
Yes.
so that we know what our stance has been in this country and how we're constantly being targeted and how we can continue to support each other and how we can do our own work so that, this continuous stereotype, it can also be dismantled. And at the end of the day, I know that we can change how people view us, but we can definitely continue to do our own work so that we can be better, so that we can continue to do the work that we need to within our communities, so that we can continue to give back, so that we can empower our communities to be better, and so that we can empower each other to really support each other and
Yes.
not be so isolated.
Yes. Yes. So, how would you suggest someone can go about, like, let's just say me, right? Maybe I decide, okay, I want to bring back community. But and that's what a lot of people, right? They want to do it, but they don't know how to start or where to go. Do you have any suggestions on maybe somebody who wants to start, like you said, a little woman's circle, or if they want to join a community, places that maybe they can go?
I know that there's a lot of different clinicians and a lot of different like community healers that are facilitating workshops and facilitating círculos, whether they're virtual or in person. I know that right now there's a fear of going out. So how do you find maybe a community that where we can use technology to support each other, right, and to build community
Oh my
and
God.
using it in a positive way? Because like everything, we can either use it for good or we can use it for bad, and
Mm-hmm.
technology is one of those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I just started a book club
There you go.
on
That's
TikTok.
community.
Yeah. And actually, the book we're going to be going over is Strong Like Water
Mhm.
by Andy Colbert. And it's all about trauma. So healing your trauma.
Yeah, because water holds memory,
Yes.
and we're made of 60 to 70% water, right?
Yes, yes, yes. That's in my book.
I mean, we are the elements, we are nature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all,
Yeah.
I also just told you I wrote a book and that's all in there because I just think it is so important. I'm going to get emotional, but I feel like it's been my calling to get people to realize like no matter where you're from, who you are, we are all energy.
Yes.
We are all part of energy. We're all atoms. We're all part of everything. It doesn't matter what it is. We are all literally created of the same freaking material. So your pain, regardless if you believe it or not, eventually will become my pain. It's
Mhm.
the world's pain. And I believe the world is crying out right
Yes.
now for understanding, for love, because love is the answer. Like, you cannot, we can want to be safe, right? But there's ways of doing things. And you like, I can't feel bad the way I voted. I voted the way I voted for my personal reasons, right? But I could feel bad the way things are turning out. I could not like how things are happening. I can change my mind and say, "You know what? I could still do things different." I wouldn't vote different. I'm sorry. I still wouldn't vote different knowing what I know now. And I could say that. I wouldn't because for me the other side would have been worse. And that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And that's my personal
And
belief, and that's
there's
my
no way of
right,
doing it, right?
right?
Because it could have been just as bad.
Yeah. We
Like
don't
we don't
know.
know.
Nobody could tell the
Yeah. Like we
future.
don't know what we don't know at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But
And so the blame part is what people need to get over because once you stop blaming, you can start hearing. You can start listening to people. And that's on both sides. That's everybody, every race, every culture.
Mhm.
The more anger, the more hate, the more fear, you're not going to be able to hear
But at the end of the
or
day,
grow or
at,
create.
and at the end of the day, all of this is happening is due to fear at the end of the day, right? Because
Yes.
we talk about how behind every behavior there's an emotion
Yes.
and fear, and because we're feeling the fear, this
Yes.
is the fear that the other side is feeling. And so they're
Yes.
projecting their fear onto us. And
Yes.
so collectively we are all feeling fear. And again, it's because of the human condition and how we have separated ourselves and disconnected ourselves from us.
Yeah. Well,
If we
see,
are not connected to us,
yeah.
how can we genuinely, authentically connect to other human beings? And when we're not connected to us, have we dehumanize ourselves sometimes because of the because of how we feel about ourselves. And if we don't feel human enough and we don't feel that love and connection with ourselves, then we dehumanize other humans. And you're right, we're all human. And if we're all human and if we're all going to experience the same thing, then again, we talk about borders, but these are just humans trying to find a better life. And maybe it's not the right way, or is there a right or wrong way? Like, we don't know at the end of the day, right? But something that we can do differently is how we are managing ourselves as humans,
Yes. But
right? And how do we
as yeah.
and how do we do our own work? How do we connect to ourselves? How do we allow ourselves to feel? And I think that we live in a society where there's just so much fear and so much hate, and why? And what can we do differently so that we can start to connect to self, so that we can start to humanize each other? And and we've talked about this, how oftentimes it starts in childhood, right? Because we
Mhm.
don't allow children to express their emotions because we are raised to be obedient. And this is what obedience does, right? And so many of us come here and we just want to do what is right for our families. And we try to follow the rules, the majority of us, right? And even though you're doing everything right, it still doesn't work out sometimes. And you're still being targeted sometimes. And so how do we start to really look within self, and not only look within self, but allow ourselves to feel our pain? Like, why are we numbing it? We
Well,
numb it either through
you could only
substances.
feel so much because we live in a world that is pretty fucked up, Andrea, and you're a
Yeah,
therapist. If you
I know.
felt everything, you wouldn't be able to be a therapist. So we
But I
have
do
to.
feel everything. That's how I am able to be a therapist.
And, we
I
can't
don't,
feel you can't feel everything and stay sane.
I, you can feel it. You don't have to hold on to it, but you
Okay.
can definitely feel
Yeah.
it.
Well,
So
that's why
how do
I'm
we
yeah.
transmute, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also about transmuting what
Yes.
we are
Yes.
feeling.
Yes.
It's not about holding on to it because that's what we're doing. We are holding on to our emotions.
Yes.
We are
I
emotional
needed to clear that
beings.
up
Yeah.
only because coming from a wife of an addict, right? You cannot feel, you have to tune out so you can think. Sometimes
But even
you
addiction.
cannot live in feelings. That's not reality, living in feelings. It'd be nice, but you can't because people feel anger, they feel frustration. If they're living in their feelings and we can live in love, but if you're living in your feelings, there's a lot of shitty feelings out there. And if people are living in their feelings, which a lot of them are addicts, right? Live in their feelings.
I think we're viewing it very differently. It's not about living in your feelings. It's about allowing yourself to feel. We are emotional beings.
Yes. Well, that's why I
We
said,
have feelings.
that's why I wanted
But
to clear
again,
that. We
we
said
have to
transmute.
we but into something positive clearly.
Yes.
How do we, like, even anger, right? Like we also have to not allow anger to be the only acceptable emotion.
Of course.
Because there's so many angry people out there.
Yes.
But anger doesn't come alone.
No.
So what else does anger come with?
Fear.
And if we are not allowing ourselves to feel the other feelings that come with our anger, we're going to continue to be angry.
Yes.
And it's not just fear, it's also a lot of sadness.
Yes.
It's also a lot of grief. And there are no shitty or bad emotions.
Yes.
There are just difficult emotions.
Yes.
And those happen to be the difficult ones.
Yeah.
And those happen to be the ones that we try to numb ourselves from.
Yeah.
And that's where addiction
Well,
stems
those are
from,
the ones that hurt so
right?
bad. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
But when we work through our emotions and we sit with them and we feel them and we allow ourselves to really connect and then release, then guess what? You will no longer be prisoner of that emotion.
Yes.
So you can choose to hold on to it and not be emotional, but then live with it the rest of your life.
Well, I
or you
think
can do
that's
the
what-
work and heal through it
Yeah.
so that you can release it and you are no longer being held captive by
But a
them.
lot of people don't even realize they're being held captive. So what I would like for you is one, help them understand if they're being held captive, right? Maybe if they don't cry. Some people don't cry. I don't know. I've heard people say they don't cry. I don't know how you don't cry. I cry in a commercial. So when they say they don't cry, it's like, maybe you're holding on to some emotions, but I don't know. I'm not the professional. That's why I'm asking you. How could they maybe spot that they're holding on to emotions and then give them some tips on how they can learn to recognize, process, and release? And of course, it's a process, right? This isn't a one and done, you guys. This
is lifetime work.
Yes, this
I've
is
been doing
lifetime.
I've been on
Yes.
my own healing journey for like over a decade,
Yes,
right? And
I
things
know.
will always come up.
Yep.
And so this is a lifelong process, but it's not about, feeling something and then releasing and never feeling it again.
Right.
Like, that's not how it works. It's about learning tools to help you through that emotion when you are feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't hold on to it, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can self-examine to see if you are internalizing emotions, right? Like,
Yeah.
that used to be me. I would never cry. And if I did, it was in my car by myself or at night or, all by myself. And now I have learned to allow myself to cry when needed,
Yeah.
right? Because crying at the end of the day is our very first form of communication. It is the first thing they want from a child when it comes into this world because it means it's alive.
Yeah.
And then we become verbal and we are no longer allowed to cry, right?
Yeah.
And so connecting back to our basic communication, which is crying. And crying, not only does it's a function and a biology of the body because it serves a function, and that's to release the overwhelming feeling of any emotion.
Yeah.
And so many things happen chemically in the brain when we do allow ourselves to cry. And so it's, allowing yourself to cry. And I know that it's difficult for some people, for a lot of people, and not just men, but women as well. And, whenever and I always hear like, oh, like I was in the middle of the story and I just wanted to cry and, but how embarrassing. We shouldn't be embarrassed to cry.
I was embarrassed to cry in church.
Yeah. Like
that
kids
should be where
children are not embarrassed to cry. We shame them. We
Mm.
shame them when they cry, but they're not embarrassed to cry. Right? I mean, as babies, what is when we are hungry, how do we communicate that?
Yeah.
When we need a diaper change, how do we communicate that? When something hurts, how do we communicate that? And then we lose it. And so, being able to connect to that, I think having tension in your body, like if you're like the I call it the club of like the raised shoulders, where you're like constantly like this
Mm.
because you're so tense.
Mhm.
It's like that's all tension in your body. Like you're so tightly wound, and so how do you start to release some of that tension in your body and through movement, right? Like
Yeah.
how do we move our bodies? How do we move that energy through our bodies,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, if you're constantly like irritable and in a bad mood, like
Yeah.
why, right?
Yeah.
Like checking in with yourself. And so many of us grow up in households where we are emotionally neglected. And so we become adults and we still don't know what our needs are
Mhm.
because our emotional needs were not met. So sometimes we are irritable and we don't even know why. Sit with it. Why am I so irritable today? What is
Yeah.
causing this irritability? Right? And we don't have our time. We don't give ourselves that time because we're so busy all the time
Yeah.
with work, with school, with kids, with marriage, with social life, with social media, with so many things. And these are the things that keep us disconnected from self.
It's so sad. It's so sad and so true. And I've made it such a like, ugh, it's in me now. Like I give myself that time. I feel my body. Like yesterday, my chest, it's like, okay, what's happening? Why am I feeling this way? But I mean, I know now. But yeah, I sit with the feelings. I go walk in nature. I touch the trees.
Mhm.
I watch the bird. Like I don't. And at first I felt really crazy because I like if they're seeing me, I'm literally like, But I love it. Like
We are nature.
yes, and it does. It is like opened my mind up so much. It has given me so many downloads. Like the last 2 weeks of just you know everything. And like we talked, we are nature. Like we as and I think that's what I struggle with the most. Humans are humans, but we still have to be safe, right? And like you said, I don't run around in fear, but I do remember history, my history, you know? So I don't want it to repeat itself. So, that's what got me, right? And then, the way the world was going anyways, that's a whole nother subject. But it's just been it's been a lot. And I want you to maybe speak to I know I've asked a lot of questions and you've responded, but I do want you to get anything out that maybe you're thinking or that you think is important for people to know, something that I don't want you to feel like you're leaving without like really talking about something that, is important to you.
I think that at the end of the day, returning to our humanity, right? And returning to our humanity doesn't have a but. Returning to humanity doesn't have borders. Returning to humanity doesn't have privilege. Returning to humanity doesn't have fear. Returning to humanity doesn't have oppression. What returning to humanity has is love and softness. And I think we're lacking so much of that because for so long we have lived in the struggle of trying to keep up and trying to do what's right and trying to be successful that we have lost a lot of it. And I and in my own work, how do we practice more softness? Because and we frown upon softness, right?
Mhm.
But have you ever been in a room full of men that feel emotionally safe where you don't feel that you're in danger?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah. But we don't have much of that.
No,
And we don't have much of that because our men aren't feeling safe.
right.
And if our men are not feeling safe, how are we feeling safe? Right? And even with these wars, we send our men out there full of fear, right? And if they already come with, a lot of adversity, like sending them out to war is not going to make it better. And so, how do we tend to our men differently? And this is, I think, a topic that we've touched on before. And because if we do something different with our men, then it directly impacts all of us.
Mhm.
And so, allowing ourselves to feel, allowing our boys to feel and express emotion, and maybe work through our own shame of our own feelings so that we don't continue to uh,
Project.
project it onto our own children and other children, right? Because you often hear like, "Oh, I was too sensitive as a kid and people didn't want to play with me." But being sensitive isn't a bad thing. It just means that you are in tune with emotion.
Hmm.
And so a little bit more softness so that we can love each other and accept each other as we are.
Are you familiar with Greg Braden's work?
I'm not.
So he talks about how, in my book, it starts with Rockefeller and Carnegie and the dumbing down of America, right? Because they wanted worker bees. They don't want free thinkers. They want worker bees. Well, now here we are, and this was in the 20s, and now we're in 2025, and that was 1920s. Uh, you have Greg Braden talking about AI and how they're trying to really just get rid of humanity,
Hmm.
our soul, because they know the power we have within.
Hmm.
That's why they've been trying to get rid of it all these years. So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know you're not familiar with the work, but you're familiar with AI and you're.
I think that at the end of the day, it's already here. And so I'm opposed to it. Not just because of the impact that it's going to have on our intellect and our humanity. And we also have some sort of contrast to where we want AI to go, right? Because we also feed it information. For me, it's about all of the resources that it uses, such as water, and we know that we are short on water. And so every time we use AI, we are wasting hundreds of gallons of water, if not more.
Really, Andrea? I had no idea.
Yeah. Um, and so I think that if we use it like everything, right? If we use it for positive, it can definitely have great impact on our society. But if we don't, it can also be our downfall.
And that's where I have a problem because most of the people that I love and adore, like you and the healers I know, are opposed to it. But I'm like, then where are your voices? We need more of your voices in there. Because if our voices aren't in there, then that only leaves the other voices. So there's no balance.
I'm pretty sure there's people out there like other healers that, are using it. And, you don't have to be a healer to be a good human and to believe in humanity and
True.
to do the work. So, at the end of the day, it's about balance, right? And, I'm not saying that I'm never going to use it. I'm sure that at some point I'm going to have no other choice but to use it.
Well, and then it depends
So,
what you use, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so as a healer, I could be using it for something that's not good. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I think, it's taking responsibility for ourselves, right? And stop thinking so individualistically. Like
Yeah.
it's not just about myself. It's about the greater good of humanity. And I can't just think of me. I have to think of my family. I have to think of my friends. I have to think of my friends' children. I have to think about my neighbor. I have to think about my clients. I have to think about their families. And so when we do things taking others into consideration, not just us, then that's how we create the change.
And what's crazy is that's why I voted the way I voted.
Yeah.
I thought of the same things you did. Isn't it wild? I thought exactly the
And
same you
maybe
did.
that's why the system is
rigged.
flawed and rigged, right?
Yeah, it's
Both.
rigged. It's not
And
flawed.
so
It's rigged.
it's rigged because it's flawed. So I think at the end of the day, we need to change something. And, maybe we don't need people telling if we are part of nature, flowers don't have a government telling them how to flower.
I mean,
right?
it's a beautiful idea, but I mean, is it realistic?
I mean,
come on. Is it realistic?
That's what it was for a very long time.
Okay, but it's not anymore, and it hasn't been for a very long time. So
yeah, but then look where we're at.
There's many different
but
thoughts.
there's a lot of societies that
are you going to open the border
for
right now? There's a war going on because of a freaking border. How are you just going to open that border and everybody's going to be like a flower? Like, it's a beautiful thought. I would love it. I mean, shit, I'm down to move into my friend's house and live in her backyard. Like, she's my community people, It'd be wonderful. And the time might come. I'll be knocking on the door because we don't know what the future holds. You've got to find your people, like you said, you do. And the open border idea is great, but we're at war, literally at war.
Created by who?
People.
Men.
Yes, but it's the
Exactly.
same men who you want to open the border to. Those men aren't dead, and their generations aren't dead. It would take generation after generation after generation to have people who think like-minded like that everywhere. But there's always going to be somebody running it, Andrea. There's always somebody running it. Even the little farm that you want, if it's a community, there's always somebody running it.
It's not about running it. It's about tending, right? So how do we
Somebody's,
tend? How do we
yes,
tend to each other? How do we tend to the land?
but
How do we
somebody's still
tend?
making the rules on how to tend to each other. There's always going to be a leader.
Well, it's the rules of nature. Like we tend to the land the way that nature is intended to be tended, and that is through again love, and that is through work. I mean, how do you? I don't know if you garden, but like
Yes.
gardening has taught me a lot.
Yes.
Like I give the plants everything that they need, and they just know what to do.
Yeah.
Nature gives us everything that we need, and we know what to do with it, but then we get indoctrinated into this society and this humanness, right? Which is against what our nature is.
Yeah, I totally agree. Anything else you'd like to leave?
Take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves, because if you're well, then we will be well for each other. And, at the end of the day, we only have control of us and how we move in the world. And we need more softness and more love.
I love it. Ugh, that was the thing when I prayed and God, like, what do I do? I said, come in love. I'm not kidding. And I knew. But, unfortunately, even everybody's perspective and idea of love is different, right?
It's what society
Healthy
teaches
love.
us what love is, right? And we feel that love is very external and very material, and it isn't. And love isn't just an action; it's so many other things. And so it's about maybe learning what love is to yourself, and how we are going to do that, because you're right, the way that I receive love is very different than the way that you do, but at the end of the day, kind of like we all know what fear is, we also all know what love is.
I love that. It's so true. Like they say, right? You'll forget what they said, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. Because love is
Because
a
we are
feeling.
emotional beings.
Yes, love's a feeling and it's an energy.
Mhm.
And that's why we can have these wonderful conversations, even though we don't think exactly the same. I just appreciate you so much for your time,
Of course, thank you.
your wisdom. It's beautiful.
Well,
Because this is the way people should communicate.
yeah, it's been a lot of work to get here, but here I am, and so I don't take it for granted, and I know that I hold a certain privilege, not just in the work, and that I've been guided to do, because I really feel that I've been guided to do this work. It was never my intention to be a therapist, um, and I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, let's just say you do a great job at it. And I do. I
Yeah.
just really appreciate you taking the time and going over this with, our listeners and myself.
course.
Because, when you do love, it's heavy.
Yeah, and and sometimes also we have to check what we were taught love is, because I grew up in a household where love was shown in a very unhealthy way, right?
Well,
And so
I think that's
I
in a lot of households.
but I can only speak for myself,
Yeah.
right? And I know within my community that is
Yeah.
the case, because I work directly with the community,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for many of us, the way that we were taught love was very unhealthy and very conditional.
I'm part of your
So,
community, and I
yeah.
can attest to that.
And
Yeah.
so it was very conditional based
Yeah.
on our behavior and
Yeah.
how good we were,
Yes.
right? So I encourage you to dismantle that mindset, right? That love is conditional, love is
Yes.
unconditional.
Yes.
And we are beings that are brought into this world full of love, and that conditioning kind of veers us away from it. So how do we return home to self?
Yeah. That's why I kept my ex's last name. I still love him. I mean, you don't stop loving somebody, but I had to distance myself for myself, right?
Yeah.
But I believe he was in my soul path,
Yeah,
110%.
and people come into our lives to teach us, right? About
Mhm. And
us.
look what
Yeah.
it's done. It's totally like started that onion, my nephew, even that. Like it just has opened me up to me again. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, you've been in there all this time, girl.
You know, a lot of people use the onion as a metaphor. I like to
Mhm.
use the artichoke because
The
when you
artichoke.
take
Oh,
all
I
of the
love that.
leaves
Oh, you
off,
get to the
you get to the heart
heart.
of it, and it's the meatiest and most delicious part.
That's my I'm gonna take that too. Yes, that
So
was
be
my
an
favorite.
artichoke.
I know. Be an artichoke. Where's the camera? Aw. Well, all right, you guys. You heard it here. Stay in love and be an artichoke. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Bye.